Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of well-being and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started. Margie Warrell is a global authority in leading with courage and unlocking the potential that fear holds dormant in people and organisations. Margie has learned a lot about facing fear, challenging norms and building courage since her childhood in rural Australia. Today, she draws on 25 plus years diverse international experience in business, leadership development and coaching to help people address the complex challenges of our time with greater clarity, compassion and courage. The titles of her 5 best-selling books, Stop Playing Safe, You've Got This, Brave, Make Your Mark and Find Your Courage, reflect her passion for empowering people to reframe risk and use fear as a positive source. Margie has been engaged by diverse enterprises such as NASA, Dell, Shell, Morgan Stanley, SAP, Novartis, and Johnson & Johnson to strengthen psychological safety and foster more agile, collaborative, and innovative cultures of courage. A mother of 4 who recently became a senior partner at Korn Ferry, Margie is particularly passionate about empowering women. An honorary of the Women's Economic Forum who sits on the advisory board of the Women's Democracy Network, Margie's doctoral research in women's leadership informs her work in cultivating more inclusive environments and advance more women to top tables. Outside of work, Margie enjoys adventure travel and most recently climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with her husband and 4 children. I'm really looking forward to speaking to Margie today. Welcome, Margie. We are so excited to be speaking with you today and we'd love to hear about what led you to the work that you do.
Well, I often tell people I wrote the books that I wanted to read. And I think my work around courage and helping people be brave and defy their self-doubts is all because I needed to be brave and defy my self-doubts. And so often I think it's been the hardest times where I've struggled the most that have ultimately fueled my passion for what I do and my career journey, this whole pathway I've taken over the last 25, 30 years. So growing up on a farm and having a pretty limited horizon, when I went to university at 18 in Melbourne, it was terrifying, totally outside my comfort zone, but it was also an incredibly expanding experience. And then finishing university and going, I really like to travel, but I'm terrified. And I never had a passport and been on a plane and setting off on it with a round the world ticket, again, terrifying, but expanding. And then just so many experiences since then in the workforce, having 4 kids, starting a business in another country with little kids. All of those things have been scary, but they've also been incredibly empowering experiences too. And I see so many people who are so talented and so gifted and have so much ability to do great things held back because of their fear of not having what it takes. And I think particularly growing up in the Australian culture, I think that the remnants of tall poppy syndrome are still there. And I think this fear of being called a wanker because you aimed too high and fell short, or being exposed as not good enough, I still think it can really sit in the driver's seat. And So it's not that I don't have any fear anymore or don't have any self-doubt. It's just that I've learned that just there's such a power that comes from defying those little voices in our heads and taking action in the presence of our fear, which is ultimately how I define courage. So there's a very long answer to your short question.
Oh, it's so important though, isn't it? Like that fear can really stop you from so many things and rob you of all those beautiful opportunities. So it's very, very valuable work. And I think that's why we're so excited to have you here today, Margie, because we suffer from that too at times, don't we, Leanne? And have learned a lot from all of your books and all of your work. So thank you. Many barriers that arise as we journey towards the things that we really want to achieve. How can we develop confidence in our capabilities and personal growth, Margie?
We often think incorrectly that we need confidence to do things. And confidence, just to kind of break it down, confidence is defined as our belief in our ability to succeed at something. And so if we're waiting until we have absolute 100% conviction that we will succeed at something, we can spend our entire lives in a waiting room. Can you succeed at launching a podcast? I mean, you didn't 100% know, but you're like, you know what? I mean, I think we can, but I'm not sure. So many things that are worthwhile doing. We don't necessarily have full confidence. Now, some people do, and that's awesome. But I think we often lack confidence. And so as you would have read, and you've got this, I say, don't wait for confidence, because we build confidence. And this comes back to like self-efficacy theory that was really popularized by Albert Bandura, that we build our belief in ourselves to do things through experience of doing it. So maybe I go and try and give a talk, and I didn't do the best talk in the world, but also the ground didn't open up beneath me. And I go, well, it wasn't brilliant, but I didn't die. And so, okay, you know what? I can do this again. And it builds our confidence bit by bit. And we build it in increments, but to build it takes courage. We have to be willing to get very uncomfortable and risk what it is we fear. And so I think I actually think courage precedes confidence, and we should never be waiting for confidence. And I'm sure for you, Leanne, I'm sure in your own experience in your career, you've had many times where you've thought, oh, I don't know if I can do it, but then you've chosen to do it. Absolutely. You've chosen, I know you went and studied, pos psych, and you went and did things. And there's a part of you that was a little terrified, but you did it anyway. And it wasn't the confidence that fueled you, it was the courage. And then over time, now you probably can look back and say to your younger self, you know what, you can do it. But at the time, you didn't know that. You had to actually risk the failure in order to get to the point of that confidence.
Oh, absolutely. And I think when I reflect over things, I think those moments where you have leaned into courage, even though it's been a bit scary, are the ones that you look back on most fondly of, I did this. I did it. I remember coming to one of it was your very first Live Brave weekend many years ago in Hepburn Springs, and the power of learning that as a collective was amazing, and even that inspired more confidence to see that, hearing your story, for example, hearing other people's stories and realizing that, hey, you're not alone in this. You're not alone in the fears that you have or the challenges that you might think or perceive to have. Often we make up this picture in our mind of what it's going to be like. And when we get there, it's often totally different in a positive way, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we often scare ourselves. There's more in our imaginations than in reality. And we come up with all these worst case, but what if I do it and then everyone finds out and I make such a fool of myself? And, it's even the Live Brave weekend that you came to, and obviously I've put on many since, it was one of the bravest things I've ever done to put on those weekends. I felt acutely vulnerable. What if no one signs up? Because it was a public, promoting it on Facebook, and like, what if no one comes? And I would just feel so humiliated. And it was such a fear of that humiliation. And I remember I would have a massive vulnerability all the way up to thinking, okay, I've got enough people now. It's going to be okay. We've got over we've got 20, it's good. And of course, they were incredibly, the most rewarding thing I've ever done was my Live Brave weekends. But, we have to risk that vulnerability. And I mean, I know you're very familiar with the work of Brené Brown around vulnerability, but vulnerability, that sense of, I'm going to be exposed, I'm going to be judged as less than, I'm going to feel rejected, I'm going to feel foolish. And we have to take that. It's the exquisite risk, it's that ultimate risk. And I think of a poem by Anne Nin that was, and then the day came that the risk of staying tight inside the bud became greater than the risk it took to blossom. Oh. And yeah, because for us to blossom as humans, I mean, we have one journey in this earth. None of us get out of it alive. It's it, right? It's finite. There is an end state. Sometimes we live as though it's not, but there really is an end state. We're all going to be finishing up our journey at some point. And the biggest risk we take is actually not taking lots of risks and not ever getting to meet the person we could be, because we're too afraid of looking foolish and what will people say, and what if he rejects me, she rejects me, I don't get it, no one signs up, the book's a flop, I don't want, my podcast doesn't land, whatever it is, and that fear just stifles so much potential and so many gifts. And I know that you have many people listening to this who I'm sure are parents, and it was Carl Jung, the psychologist, who said the most damaging thing to a child is the unlived life of a parent. And I believe, as a mother myself, who juggled and dropped so many balls raising my kids, they're getting older, but they're still not 100% self-sufficient, but, daring to do something that was really cool to me while also trying to juggle being a mum. And I think so often we can let what we think society expects of us and our desire to look good and avoid criticism and disapproval can keep us from pursuing what tugs on our hearts and from using our gifts in ways that leave the world a little bit better. And yeah, that all takes courage. And I'm sure for both of you ladies, just like me, I've tried a lot of things and it has not landed as well as I'd like. And that hurts. It's a bit painful. But then you go, well, at least I don't have to go to my grave wondering, what if I'd tried?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? Because what if is a question that can change your whole mindset on, well, what if it did work, rather than, oh, what if someone sees that I can't do this or I don't have the capabilities. It's just such a beautiful one. And the courage behind you is just such a gift in itself.
It can be hard to lean into that courage to start the podcast or to take that extra learning or whatever, step into a role even. But you can sit in that, oh no, I'm not going to do it because, what if I get embarrassed? What if I don't do it properly? All those sorts of things. Whereas if you do it and you try and you fail, that's okay. But also when you succeed, the gift that comes from that is the personal growth that happens, the realization that, hey, I can actually do this, and people seeing you.
Two things I want to say on that. One is the greatest gift from us being brave with our lives and having courage and operating from a belief that I've got this even when we're not quite sure how, isn't what we achieve. It's not that we wrote the book and, it sold X copies. It's not that we got the job. It's not that you launched the podcast. It's not that you whatever. It's not the medals and the accolades. It's actually who you become in the process, who you are, because you've had the guts to try. And maybe you succeeded and maybe you didn't quite get the outcome you wanted, but maybe you got another one that was awesome, even better. It's who you become in the process of your couraging. And so it's not about what we achieve. It's actually who we become. And secondly, yes, sometimes we get the accolades and sometimes we don't. But I think that the better question isn't what you do if you're being brave. It's asking ourselves, what is so worthy of doing that even if you failed, you wouldn't regret having tried? And I remember that writing my very first book, Find Your Courage. I had 4 kids under 7, and I went to a tiny little school in an area called East Gippsland, Victoria, 15 kids in the school. I never learned any of the laws of the English language. I still don't know what a lot of things that my kids talk about, a conjunctive verb or whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And that just didn't happen in my education. And But I felt really passionate about what I wanted to do. And I'm like, oh, but I'm only, at the time, I think I was 37 or something. I've got 4 kids and I don't really know what I'm doing. And my husband said, honey, well, when you're old and wise one day and you know what you're doing, you can write another book. But why don't you just write the best book you can right now? Mm. And it gave me permission to just write the best book I could versus writing some literary masterpiece. Mm. And so I wrote that book, and I wrote it in all the nap times over about 18 months. And it actually was, to your point, Leanne, it was a game changer, because I think I'm a better writer now, but I wouldn't have got to be a better writer if I hadn't written the first book. Yeah. But more so, writing that book, and I plugged it and spruiked it, which, honestly, self-promotion is something around books that I'm like a bit exhausted from right now, because you have to plug yourself all the time, right? Unless you're super famous, which, certainly didn't have any platform. There wasn't even Facebook when that book came out. But that book got picked up by a big publisher, and then that publisher published it. And then I got on to did radio, and then I did television, and then I ended up on the Today Show in New York. And then, suddenly people were calling me to speak, and then that opened up. So you never know which doors will open. You never know who's noticing you, Leanne. You said, people notice you. You don't know who's noticing. You don't know what doors will open. But when you're kind of moving toward what gives you energy, you radiate it out. And it's that Goethe poem that, when we're bold, all sorts of amazing synchronicities and things happen that wouldn't happen if we were sitting at home waiting to feel confident and waiting until we knew we couldn't fail. Yeah.
Yeah. Confidence comes from, though, like you said, is that courage. Like, I think of our journey, Leanne, throughout our whole time of working together, we have really discovered so much about ourselves and had the courage to just have a go and see what happens. That whole experiment and that play, it's just been beautiful. Courage is it's almost like the ultimate word. I know in education, I use that with our kids all the time, and it's always about courage. Do you have the courage to start? Do you have the courage to have a thought about it? Do you have a courage to have a conversation? It's just such a gift.
Yeah, it is. And I think what's really important, as a teacher and in education, and I feel like I'm an educator of sorts, is recognizing it's actually a skill. We often think of it as a trait, like, some people are bold and brave and some people aren't. And clearly we have different personalities. Some people are risk takers and some people are really naturally cautious and timid. Got it. Thank God the world has different people, because we wouldn't want everyone to be Richard Branson. We wouldn't want everyone to be Bear Grylls. We wouldn't want to have a world where everyone was like this, filled with bravado and a willingness to just do really risky things. That said, so yes, there is an element that's a trait, but courage is a skill. It's also like learning piano or learning how to speak a language or make a souffle. You get better at it with practice. And so even someone who is naturally a nervous Nelly, who's timid and shy, who goes, I'm just not a brave person. I'm just, that's not me. I call big, loud BS on that and say, you have within you the ability to be really brave and to have courage and to take a risk and to speak up and to step onto a stage. Now, you might never feel called to do something that requires you to step onto a stage or write a book or whatever. But you are called to do something meaningful with your life. We all are. And 100% guaranteed for you to do something meaningful with your life is going to require you to have courage, whether or not you feel like it. And the opening line of you've got this is, you may know or may remember, is, sometimes we have to be braver than we want to be. But the truth is, everyone can be brave, and you build it with increments. And I just always say, just start with right where you are right now and go, well, what would I do right now if I was being brave? And it could be, well, I would invite someone out for coffee and I'm not sure if they want to go and they might think I'm being weird, or I would say no to an invitation and risk disappointing someone. That takes courage. I'd share with someone that what they said hurt my feelings, or I'd extend a compliment and have risk people thinking I'm a bit weird, whatever it is. But I think all of us are called to be brave in different ways and in different seasons of our life that really can take on a very different form.
Margie, speaking of being brave and leaning into courage, that taking action, as we've discussed, can be really scary. How might we play to our strengths to take risks without that fear of being defined by their outcome?
Well, firstly, I think if there's something you want to do, it's because you have within you the capacity to do it. But it doesn't mean you're going to land the gold first time, right? And we all have a different combination of strengths and gifts, which is great. And I think, how do we use them? It's like, just look at what it is. What is it that gives you energy? I mean, I always think about energy. You know, what is it that makes you feel more alive in yourself and in your life? And if you're not moving toward something like that, then you need to find something else and move toward it, because life's too short to be feeling like you're languishing on the sidelines. And not being defined by it. Well, that part of it is really resilience. And as you know, Leanne, from your studies in pos psych, Marty Seligman said you can tell how successful someone will be by how they, by what they call their explanatory style, how they explain their failures. And when we explain our failures as permanent deficiencies on our part, as personal, like I will always be hopeless at, I don't know, public speaking, whatever it is. So we'll make it all pervasive. I'm hopeless at all these things, versus it was one thing at one time. And that's, you failed at that thing at that moment in time. And you are not a failure. You just happen to fail at something. It's an event, not a person. I think when we're able to kind of reconstruct how and re-relate how we relate to failure as an experience that's valuable in teaching us, well, that didn't work. And not to over personalize it, but how do we extract all of the learning? Someone misses out on a job, then maybe they've gone for 10 interviews and they've missed out on 10 jobs. Well, don't just go, oh, it's not about me, it's about them. No, well, what is it about maybe how you are interviewing that you could look at? Don't feel bad about yourself. Don't throw yourself a shame party, but just go, okay, well, you know, maybe I need to get some coaching on how I'm doing this. Maybe it's I'm not conveying my value in the most articulate way that's landing the way people want to hear it. Maybe I need to polish up on my knowledge or whatever it is.
Margie, in your beautiful book, You've Got This, you explain a few questions that really help us to own our doubts and turn them into opportunities to learn and grow. Are you able to share some of those with us?
Yes. So firstly, just recognizing who you are is not what you tell yourself. I mean, doubt is just a story you're spinning in your head about something. And maybe it's true and maybe it's not. I doubt my ability to fly. You know, that's a good doubt. I really don't think I can fly. Well, not with my, you know, not without a plane. So I think just recognizing that who we are is not the stories we tell ourselves. It's not our doubts. And by recognizing that our doubts aren't necessarily true and doubting our doubts. And so as you saw in You've Got This, I sort of shared a series of questions to help people unpack, like step back. What is it you're telling yourself? And actually, there's a real power in writing it down. So what is your doubt? It's like, oh, I don't know if I've got what it takes. So I don't know if I'm good enough for this. I'm not sure. And then just asking yourself, you know, what evidence is there that contradicts this doubt? Does this doubt make me feel more powerful and positive? And if the answer is no, well, then it's probably not serving you. You know, what is this doubt costing you? What is it that you're not doing because you're letting this doubt sit in the driver's seat and go, I'm not going to try? Who could you be without that doubt? Like if I could go into your brain and pull that doubt out of your brain, what would be possible for you if you never again thought X? Imagine that. If you never again thought, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not beautiful enough, or I'm not lovable enough, or whatever it is. And finally, you know, what might be a more useful belief instead? What could you tell yourself? And maybe you don't really believe it, like, oh, I am fully capable of achieving this goal. You're like, yeah, I'm not really. But if you just dared to operate from that belief, what would that open up? How would that shift the emotions that you're living in? And I think just key to remember here is that emotions drive behavior, not logic. You know, we're not logical, rational creatures, we humans. We're driven by emotion. And so often we believe stories about ourselves that leave us feeling stressed or resentful or less than, inadequate, in blame, self-pity, victimhood. We live in a big victim culture now. People live in this story of I'm just a victim. And that's not to say you're not a victim of something outside your control. But when we operate from a victim mindset, it completely keeps us from taking the very actions that would help us to rise above the circumstances and the events we've dealt with. And so I think it's a really important process to go through, and just really challenging those belief systems that we're buying into.
And especially turning them into, when we have those thoughts, they're not facts, but when we believe they're facts, we just minimize the opportunities for us for growth. And that's just so important. And having that window into reflecting on, are they actually serving us or are they actually hindering us, is so invaluable.
Yeah, and I've done this so many times over the years, even with kids or some person, you don't get invited to something and the feelings are a bit hurt. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm feeling hurt, but I wasn't invited, or I applied to do something and I didn't get accepted. And I mean, I've had that stuff happen a million times. The publisher didn't like the book, or I didn't make this, whatever it is. And I thought, Margie, what's another story you could tell yourself right now about this? And it's like, you know what, who says that everyone should like what you're offering? Who says that you shouldn't have challenges as you move forward? What is the valuable experience from that? How is this helping? How will this be part of your story one day on resilience? And by sometimes just creating another story around it, it shifts the emotions we're feeling. You know what? It's okay. I remember getting hurt one time from not being invited to something. I'd moved to Melbourne and I hadn't lived there for nearly 20 years. And my son started in year 8 at his school. And I went for a walk up the street one night and all these mums from his class were all having dinner. And I looked in the restaurant and I was like, oh, they're all having dinner and they didn't invite me. And I was with my husband and I said, I didn't get invited. He goes, what are their names? I said, I don't know their names. He said, you don't even know them. I'm like, I know, I just wish they'd asked me. He said, so you're getting hurt that they've rejected, but you don't even know their names. I'm like, no, I just know that they're the year 8 mums. But like, there I was feeling really hurt about something that was ridiculous. Like, of course, they've known each other since their kids are in prep and I'm a new mum and they didn't invite me. And so sometimes we kind of start creating a default story of, oh, they don't like me. And they don't know you and you don't even know their name. So, and he said, you probably really wouldn't enjoy their company anyway. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's go with that.
We are so good at believing our own story. And this has come up in other conversations. We discount what others see in us because we're so caught up in believing in our own story, where when those people are reflecting what they see in us, that's what we should be believing. And those moments of, oh, I didn't get invited to that, or I missed out on that job opportunity, or whatever it is, like you say, they are moments, and they're opportunities for lessons and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, every challenge we have is an opportunity if we reframe it, right? But often we don't like to look at it that way. I mean, we all have a negativity bias. We're wired to focus on what's wrong, what's missing, and who's to blame. Someone else, or it's my fault. But either way, I'm not happy. And instead, looking at it goes, well, what's right? What's the gift in this? How can I turn this into a win? Every situation. I mean, Napoleon Hill said many decades ago, every adversity holds the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And in the midst of a tough time, we go, what the frick is the seed in this? What is the benefit in this? And I get it. Sometimes there's just hard things, there's tragic situations. But we also know that, like, post-traumatic growth, coming out of a trauma, coming out of loss, if we look for ways to channel our suffering into a positive purpose, how can I take this and use it in a way that's positive for me and meaningful, but also is going to be positive for other people as well, and take the focus off the woe me, and like, how can I make this, okay, I'm going to use this experience for good. And I know, Leanne, I've had significant tragedy in my own family, and I remember in the aftermath of my youngest brother taking his life after a long battle with mental illness, there was no happy ever after on that. It was like, oh, and then he recovered and it was all great. It was like, no, he has died. He will never live the life he could have lived. And it was just tragic, and the suffering he went through. And I remember giving myself a lot of time to sit and to journal and to cry and to just process for months and months. And, grief comes in waves, and over time the waves get further apart and they aren't as big. And then every now and again, there's some big one rolls in. But I just remember as I journaled on it, and I thought, what good can come from this? And what I got clear of, I'm going to live my life in a way that honours the life he never got to live. And I haven't been saddled with a big struggle with severe mental illness. So how can I live my life in a way that honours the life he didn't live, and be really intentional about that? Because some people don't get the opportunities. Some people don't get good mental health. Some people just don't have opportunities. And so that's part of also what drives me. You asked at the very start of this conversation. And I mean, that happened. I was, by that time that happened, I was in my early 40s and was already sort of doing the work I'm doing, but it only reinforced my passion. Yeah. You know what? I am just going to double down even more. So, yeah, and I think those intense emotional experiences like that, they can make us very bitter and leave us in a state of grief, bitterness, sadness, anger, etc. Or we can go, okay, how can I transform this? How can I use this as a catalyst to make something really beautiful with what's ahead?
Yeah. I have to share, when I heard your story, Margie, I was full of admiration, for the bravery to sort of take that forward and lead by example, I think, as well, showing us that we can have challenge. And of course, everyone's different in how they experience grief and challenges of any kind, but how we navigate the way through and out of that is very important.
It's that choice, isn't it, that we've been chatting about? We can choose to sit in that, discomfort for way too long that doesn't serve us, or we can, when we're ready, to emerge and do, like you said, what's, your passion for your life, and also serving others, which can really help. So that choice of listening to those self-doubts, listening to those, scary struggles for too long, or have a choice to learn from something in there and then flip that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, Viktor Frankl wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, and for those who don't know, he survived the Holocaust and lost all of his family. And he wrote about how, when we cannot change our circumstances, and for instance, if you've suffered significant loss or any trauma, anything that's hard, we can't always change our circumstances, but we can always change how we respond to them and choose how we respond to them. And that is what ultimately personal responsibility is about. That's actually was chapter 1 of my very first book, Find Your Courage, is courage to take responsibility. That is, you don't always get to choose your experiences in life, but you always get to choose your experiences of life. And yeah, shit happens and tragedy strikes and life can be unjust and cruel at times. And then we have to pick ourselves up and just recognizing that any emotion, when we sit in it long enough, becomes a mood and it can cloud us. So we all feel loss at times. It's so legitimate to feel sad and grief. It's legitimate to feel anger. It's legitimate to feel those emotions that we think of as negative emotions. But key is not to just end up letting them set up permanent residence in our psyche, because then we just become an angry person, or we just become an anxious person, or we just become a sad person. And it's like, no, I can feel really sad and not be a sad person. I can be really bloody angry, but not be an angry person. So all our emotions are legitimate, and we should never try and positive wash them away. And I think we are in a culture that sometimes does that, but by the same token, we shouldn't just get drowned in them. And you see sometimes people do that because they get a payoff. It feeds a sense of significance to be always in a drama, or to be woe me, or to be a victim. There's a payoff to that. But, is that serving your highest good? Is that helping you flourish? No, it's not, beyond a point of just literally giving yourself space to process whatever's, you've experienced. So.
In the conversations that we've had with many of our guests, they've shared that often it was someone believing in them that helped them to stay focused and move towards their goal. When it comes to that, you've got this mindset, can you explain the importance of role models?
Yeah, well, I would simply say that having people that we can look to that inspire us, and they may be in our life and they may actually not be in our life. They may be people from history, or they may be people that we admire in the world, but it actually helps us see what's possible. But I would say also, you just talked about having people believe in us. We know that connection builds resilience. And at times when our own courage is running low, we can lean on the courage of others. So I think it's so important to be intentional in who you spend your time with, because there's a lot of people who can pull you down, particularly if you want to do something different, if you want to make a change, if you want to step away from the status quo. The gravitational pull of the status quo is very strong. And if everyone around you is going, oh, why would you do that? Oh my God, you might fail. Then you're going to go, oh yeah, heck I might. Okay, I'm just going to go back and just do exactly what I've done and, you know, sit at the pub on the Friday night with you rather than go out and do something else. Not that there's anything wrong with pubs and Friday nights, but making sure you're surrounding yourself with people who help you become a better version of yourself. You know, I feel like that should be a criteria for who you marry, for who you hang out with, for are they helping you become a better version of yourself? You know, and that's an ongoing thing, right? You know, or are they making you be a smaller version of who you want to be? And so I am very intentional of hanging out with people who challenge my thinking, who lift me higher. And if I'm having a really shitty, terrible, no good, Alexandra bad day, we'll go, you know what, it's okay. You know, it's totally okay having that day, but I believe in you and you'll get through this and I know your future's bright. And so we're not going to let you stay in that place. So I just sometimes have to challenge women actually at times. Just be careful that you don't hang out with habit friends, that you hang out with them because you've known them since you were 4, but they actually are constricting who you are. Sometimes we have to prune our tree and to allow you know, we have to stop spending time with those people so that we can create space to spend time with more people. And I think it's easy to fall into that trap, particularly if you've never left a particular area. You physically lived in the same place, it's the same people. Sometimes it's hard, it creates social disruption, but you've got to ask yourself, what's the price you're paying if you don't do that as well?
Yeah. I love that term, pruning your own tree. And it's so relevant, I think, especially as young people as well. We can be very influenced by those around us and not necessarily see the opportunities before us. If we were to step into that courage to move towards a leadership or move to a different area, it can feel scary to let go. And it doesn't mean that we can feel that it's very final to do that, but it doesn't have to be final. It's you know, sometimes it's just limiting that time, and that helps you to progress forward.
Yeah, you'll know Lane Beachley, and a venture of mine that didn't succeed wildly was called Raw Courage TV. And I think you can still get on rawcouragetv.com or rawcourage.tv. And I interviewed lots of people, and Lane was one of the many wonderful people I interviewed. I just didn't know how to market it, so it wasn't particularly successful commercially. But, you know, I remember Lane talking about just avoiding dream thieves and dream stealers, you know, people who rob you of your dreams, but particularly if you've got a dream, it's something, it's an idea and it's really fragile. And I remember when I wrote my first book, I didn't tell some people because I just couldn't deal at that point with them going, what are you writing a book about? I mean, how do you know about it? Right? Yeah, I just didn't need any of that. Now I could deal with that because I'm like, know what? I know I'm solid in this. But at that point I didn't. So I think to your point, there's times when you have to be particularly protective of who you let into your emotional space, who you share your aspirations with. And sometimes we're a little more fragile. Our dreams are a little more fragile than other times. So kind of just hang out with people who will pour lots of water on them until they're big enough that you can deal with the naysayers.
Love that.
I agree. And I was just thinking about, you can tell when you're mindfully aware of your emotions and how you're feeling, you can feel when someone's pulling you in a direction that you don't really particularly want to go to. And then you've got the other sort of flip side where you've got people around you who always say to you, you've got this. Go for it. They're your dreams. We're going to champion you all the way. And then you've got the others who will be, no, you shouldn't do that. Why would you do that? Why don't you just hang with us in our little space and don't grow?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, it's a sign that, you know, you're growing when you're gravitating toward other people. Sometimes it's like, you know what, who says that we should all stay exactly the same over the 70, 80 years of our life? You know, it's a good thing that you sometimes go, you know what, I don't know if I want to hang out with them now. I actually really love hanging out with this person over there because they're up to stuff, and I want to hear what they're up to because it inspires me to be up to stuff, you know, so.
That is amazing. Based on our conversation today, and along with all of your beautiful books that we will definitely share in our show notes, do you have a book or a podcast or a TED Talk or something that you think that you could recommend to our listeners today?
Oh, well, so funny. You should ask that. I have all of those things. And I say that very tongue in cheek. I have a TED talk called How to Be Brave that people can find. Just look up How to Be Brave with my name. I have my own Live Brave podcast, which I'm not doing as regularly as you are, but there's lots of podcasts on there to listen to. And of course, I've written several books, but I would recommend You've Got This. I think that's probably the one that speaks to the most people. And I'd also just encourage people to jump onto my website, margiewarrell.com, and sign up for my Live Brave newsletter. And I have a course there. It's for videos on how to be brave, where I share my own life lessons. So yeah, there's lots of ways. And then connect on social media and Insta and, LinkedIn and Facebook or wherever people hang out. So,
and all of your resources are spectacular. They are so helpful. I get quite addicted to them and have to sometimes ban myself from having a Margie Warrell day because they're
I'm extremely flattered that you say that. Thank you. Because I have a little voice in my head sometimes that goes, does anyone read anything? So thank you. I'm going to go, okay, did you read it? Yeah. So I always appreciate when people put a comment or a like. I'm like, oh, good, thank you. I'm not immune to the moments of doubt too.
Well, I was just saying this, and this comes from Leanne. Leanne has got me hooked on to doing audio books, which is so outside my comfort zone because I love to have my own and I highlight everything. And we both did our Masters of Applied Positive Psych, so we're continually having these conversations. But I said to Leanne just recently, I've listened to You've Got This by Margie, and I said, I felt like every time I used to try and find times to drive so that I could put it in the car, and it was like you were having a conversation with me, and I'm like, the whole time I was going, yes. It was like we were having our own personal journey in my car.
It's funny you say that because I loved reading it, and when I read it like I was talking to someone.
We are so grateful for the time that you've spent with us. I'm a big fan of Margie's. I love her to bits. I love her wisdom. I love
her authenticity, Leanne. Yes. And she has always been like that. And it comes across in all of her work. So when she's talking to you, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's in a book, whether it's a presentation, her TED talk, whatever, you just feel like she's either your sister or someone she's part of your peer group. And her advice is, she cuts all of the research into just everyday language, but she lifts you up. Like you can't not feel lifted up by her. She's just incredible.
That's so true. I wrote so many notes down as well, like just going through this wonderful conversation. And, something that stood out to me was she talked about waiting in the waiting room, waiting to be courageous, waiting to feel confident. And that really struck a chord with me. I reflected on my own life and thought, I've spent a bit longer than I probably wanted to in the waiting room sometimes.
Absolutely.
But, we learn from that. And we build our belief in ourselves through doing it. And
failing. And getting up and going and learning every time we fail. What is it? That's a first attempt in learning. Actually, she talks about in her book and also some of her podcasts, and so does Adam Grant, actually, when they talk about that those things are just our first drafts. Yes. So we don't have to get things perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nothing in nature is perfect. In actual fact, if you're perfect, no one gets to know the real you or the real story.
Well, we don't get to see, like when we're working on a project, for example, there'll be a few things. We don't get it perfect first time, do we?
We don't ever get it right, though.
No.
There's nothing that's perfect.
No. And I think realizing that is important.
And having the courage to admit it and to admit your failure and go, I failed, fantastic, and celebrate it. That's what I love.
Yeah.
I love it when she talked about Lane Beachley's message about the dream thief.
Yes, I was just looking at that myself.
I was just thinking about how many times, and we know from our Masters of Applied Positive Psych, when you talk about, what is your vision of your best future self, and what would your future self actually be saying to you to encourage you to move forward? You can have these dreams, but often our inner critic or our self-doubt tells us that we can't do those things. So what's stopping and what's taking away from our own dreams? Well, the dream thieves, apparently, and I love that term. So thank you to Lane Beachley and Margie Warrell for that one.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to take from that conversation. It was a very rich.
The questions that I love about owning your doubts is really important.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest one about the courage is the courage to start. And I know you and I have been talking about this for a long time. You know, I've got so many things that I know I really want to bring out in the world, but I've just got to start. I've got to have the courage to start, and if it doesn't work, well, who knows? We'll actually have started a couple of them, and it's a long road, but it's a journey. That's the journey of it. That's the most successful thing,
and
not
I think
the
that's
outcome.
One of the most precious gifts I think I've received from others is, you know, the wisdom from people such as Margie and the like of, you know, just start. Just start. You might not get it right. It might not be
But
the
you
perfect.
You might.
That's
so
right.
So what if? What if is what if I fail? Or what if it will actually work?
Yeah. It's
and
like
having the courage to do it, and remember, learning as the lens over the top of that. What am I learning in this? Okay, I failed here, so what did I learn? Oh, I forgot that part. Oh, I still need to get that other skill.
It reminds me of that quote from Peter Pan, and I probably won't get it right, but it's, you know, what if I fall? And they say, but yes,
what if you could fly, my darling?
Exactly. Yeah. What if you could fly?
And that brings us back straight away to the importance of having those mindsets from people around you that actually can champion you and see the things in you that perhaps you still haven't unlocked. You know, what are those gifts moving forward?
Oh, wonderful. And thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.